Q&A. We'll invite anyone who wants to ask their question verbally to do that, and then we can follow up with the written questions in the chat. Cool. So that's the housekeeping bits. We'll start off with introducing ourselves. We have a couple people from the RCC team on the call today. We very much want to use this as a time for everyone to put faces to names and sort of humanize the whole thing. Like I said, we're trying to build a community. So we'll just start with some introductions. So I'm Sarah. I'm the project manager here at the RCC. I actually have a background in agricultural science. I studied environmental and agricultural science at McGill. And then while there, I worked on the university's program management side of their startup incubator programs, which led me to sort of work in ag tech, which brought me to Ireland, where I worked with a team to build out a network and number of programs to connect and support early stage startups across the country. So parallels there about what we're doing with the RCC. So a few years and the pandemic later, I decided to go back to grad school, where I studied forestry at UBC before joining the RCC team in July. So I'll hand over to Amber now to introduce herself.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Good to see all the faces. That I recognize some faces in the audience. It's good to see everyone. I'm Amber. I'm the tree planting resource manager for the RCC network. I have a background in forest research, so that's where I kind of started my career, studying forest establishment after wildfire and tree harvesting north of Thunder Bay. Then I went to work in community forestry, spent 5 years working for the City of Edmonton's naturalization team, running tree planting plans and leading tree planting operations in the Root for Trees program. And then I led Tree Canada's national greening program for a few years before coming to Forest Ontario, where I managed tree planting projects through the 50 million tree program. Some of you might be aware of that program. So this is all to say that I have a variety of experiences and background with leading tree planting initiatives in different regions of Canada. So I hope to bring some of my knowledge and experiences to this community. I'm just excited to meet everyone today.
Awesome. And then we'll hand over to Dean.
All right. So good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in Canada. I'm Dean Asinaway. I'm a member of the Sagamuk Anishinaabe, which is an Ojibwe nation on the shores of Lake Huron. But today, I make my home out of Bonfield, near North Bay, Ontario. In my work, I'm a registered professional forester with the OPFA, and my main work is I do consulting. I do a number of projects, including forest auditing with KPMG, and do that work primarily in Western Canada, some in Ontario. In the past, I've worked for organizations such as Hydro One as an Indigenous lead on their First Nation Métis relations team. I've worked for organizations such as FP Innovations, which is research and development for Canada's forest industry. That was pre-COVID. I've worked with the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, as well as a Indigenous Opportunities Advisor. And I also do a number of individual projects in the areas of economic development with First Nations in Ontario. So happy to meet everybody and continue to work with you in the future.
Awesome. Awesome. And then Tom, would you introduce yourself now?
Yeah, nice to meet everybody. I'm Tom Haney, and I'm just looking at that headshot. Hope you're not too alarmed. That was taken 2 children in a pandemic ago, so I'm not sure I look that young anymore. But yeah, so a little bit about myself. I recently joined Forest Canada as the French language coordinator, as in this week. So I'm still a little wet behind the ears. My background is in communications, specifically translation and bilingual copywriting, and I've done a lot of work for federal departments and private companies as well. My primary role with Forest Canada will be to develop engaging content in both official languages and also to work on existing assets to translate them and make sure they're available in French. I'm also a landowner, and since 2007, I've been reforesting the 40-acre property I grew up on in Caledon, Ontario. done most of the planning myself, but I've worked with the TRCA, which is the Toronto Region Conservation Authority. And I've really focused on a lot of more difficult to establish species, more southern species like shellbark and shagbark hickory, tulip trees. And, my goal is to really future-proof the property against the onslaught that's coming in terms of genetic diseases and climate change. So I'm actually this year planning a shellbark hickory seed orchard, which I'm excited about, and I'll be 6 feet under by the time it produces anything, but at least it'll be in the ground. So yeah, I'm really happy to be part of Forest Canada and excited about the Reforest Canada Collective. And just want to mention for our French participants, avant de donner la parole à Sarah et Amber, j'ai 2 éléments d'ordre administratif à mentionner. Premièrement, quiconque souhaite poser une question en français, n'hésitez pas à le faire et moi, je pourrai la traduire. Et deuxièmement, on va traduire cette présentation en français. Alors, si vous voulez en obtenir une copie, elle sera à votre disposition une fois la traduction faite. So yeah, that's it from my end, and I'll pass it back to Sarah and Amber.
Awesome. Okay, so now hopefully we feel a little bit more comfortable, familiar with everyone. We can get into it. So just going to signpost for everyone. We've done the introductions. I'm going to go through the overview of the RCC, and the way that we'll sort of do that is like, what is it now? Where did it originate from, and where are we going? Then we'll have some time for Q&A and to connect with each other. So what is the RCC? In short, it's a community and a resource network that connects organizations implementing tree planting and forest restoration projects in Canada for knowledge sharing and collaboration. So the main aim here is to build capacity to enhance both the scale and quality of tree planting and restoration projects nationwide. But what does that actually mean? What does that manifest as? So we see the RCC as a platform that serves essentially 3 main functions. So like I mentioned, a community, a diverse network of tree planting actors, which includes 2 billion tree recipients. The RCC is funded by the 2 billion tree program, but it also includes the wider network of people and actors that are required to get those projects done. So that can include anything from seed collectors to nurseries, tree planters, community leaders, what have you. The next is a collaboration space. So we found the need for a space for this community to come together and talk about things, to sort of work through challenges and work together. You'll see that in our events that we'll talk about later in the presentation. And then finally, right now, the Knowledge Hub is sort of a curated place of information on specific to implementing tree planting in Canada. So I'll let Amber, our resources manager, talk a little bit more about the Knowledge Hub and the planning a project aspects of the RCC website.
Okay, so we wanted to kind of give some content basically for the website launch back in December. So I created planning a project section on the website that has 7 broad categories of tree planting. This is where we're going to be building knowledge, the Knowledge Hub content from. So I'll run through kind of like where it is on the website and how to use it. So the pages are intended to give you an overview of all the steps involved in tree planting and to 7 categories, like I mentioned. And those categories also happen to align with the chronological order of how you would normally go about a tree planting project. You'll find the online material on the homepage, and you can also access it from the top banner on our website. Within that resource, you'll find content that's geared towards both tree planting program managers as well as contractors. So you kind of have a bit in there for everybody. What I wanted to do with that content is give a very basic overview of all the aspects involved in tree planting for mass seedling projects without getting too detailed in terms of like actual methods or applications, which can vary by region. So the specific applications for regions and detailed methodologies, I do plan to build inside of the Knowledge Hub. So if we look at just, for instance, one category as an example, say we're looking at land and site selection, this subpage has written content that's just to give an overview of what to consider when you're finding land or finding a project site to plan your project around. And then later in the Knowledge Hub, I featured a few external resources to give you, to basically guide you for your specific region in terms of finding suitable land and kind of doing the species selection process for your project. In the future, I hope to be publishing different articles with different external authors, internal and external authorship that also relate to the 7 topics, so that there we can branch out even further into detail on that one particular topic. So I'm looking forward to kind of building out those resources. I will say the Knowledge Hub in general is starting out really small. I want to start with a few tried and true comprehensive guides for tree planting across Canada. And we're prioritizing resources that people actually do use on a regular basis, either to train staff or to check in with regularly as a reference. All the content and resources will focus on mass seedling plantings. So we're not including a ton of stuff on urban tree plantings. You can find resources on urban tree planting projects on the ISA website, for example. We also have FCM's GCCC program. They have a ton of resources on their webpage as well. And then I know Tree Canada is doing some stuff too with their new coaching services being offered. That includes resources for urban projects. With the planning project page and the Knowledge Hub as well, I want to say that this is meant to be a bottom-up type of community. So we want to welcome any feedback about the content that's already published, as well as welcome ideas and authorship for future content. So we really want to build from the community's need and start simple and kind of work our way up to the detailed later. At the bottom of this Knowledge Hub page, you'll also find other really useful databases for finding knowledge on tree planting. So for instance, the Canadian Conservation and Land Management, CCLM, their knowledge portals, one example where you can find it's a lot of NRCan guides and NRCan presentation recordings that have been published that you'll find useful to the 2 billion program and just tree planting in general. So yeah, I'm looking forward to really expanding on this Knowledge Hub and just general knowledge exchange as well. And we hope to connect all of this with our events too. Feel free to get in touch anytime if you have questions about the resources, you want to contribute a resource or ask about anything. My email's right there in the chat, resources@reforestcollective.ca. And yeah, I'm excited for the rest of the discussion today.
Cool. Okay, so now that we kind of know what the RCC is right now, we're going to take a step back and talk about where it kind of came from before we talk about what we think it could be in the future. So some of the key issues or challenges that brought about the recognition for the need of the RCC, and there are many. These are just a few. We'll touch on perhaps the most, I guess, positive of the 3 is that in recent years, there's just been a big increase in interest in and funding for tree planting, such as from the 2 billion tree program, which has led to more projects being implemented and more organizations sort of venturing into the tree planting space, which is great. But that's also led to an increase in competition for limited funding partners and other resources, which is fine. Then there's climate change, which we all understand is adding complexity and uncertainty to projects. And then finally, capacity gaps along the supply chain and also regionally have just sort of been exacerbated and highlighted by this increase in sort of demand on the system for an increased interest in projects. So from there, over the last 6 months, what have we been doing to sort of advance the RCC and get it to where it has been today? So we've been collaborating with NRCan. We've been meeting weekly with Jordan and Andrew, who are on the call, to have frequent and regular conversations to try to understand the potential for support and how to best structure that. We've engaged a working group. So we worked with 8 2BT recipient organizations with projects across the country to sort of have a little inception phase insight group to understand shared challenges and where we should focus initially, and just different things to think about, how challenges manifest differently for organizations in different places and of different sizes. We've been meeting with different people across the support landscape, trying to understand what's already out there so we're not duplicating efforts. So for example, Amber mentioned the CCLM is a great resource network that NRCan is actually a big part of. So we didn't want to duplicate efforts there. And then finally, we've launched the website. So just want to be very clear about the fact that the website, what it is right now, is very much a foundation that we want to build on. RCC is a community and a resource for and by the community. So we encourage you to take a look around the website, understanding that it will evolve and it will evolve based on your feedback. So shoot us an email if you have any feedback on the website. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the origin and the context from which the RCC sort of was born, the working group want to say a huge thank you to these organizations for all of their time over the last little bit. They all collaborated to write this article that goes into further detail of the need for something like the RCC. So I also just want to clarify that the RCC is not aiming to compete with or replace any of the existing very active and valuable knowledge and resource networks that are already out there. We mentioned the CCLM. Replant.ca has been around for a while. They really focus on the post-harvest reforestation community. The CASH is a group that's out in BC that's very specific to BC. Canadian Tree Nursery Association we are working with. So there's a lot of great information out there. The RCC draws on and seeks to complement these existing initiatives rather than sort of compete or dismiss anything that they're doing. And then, as Amber mentioned, for urban project support, the Growing Canada's Community Canopies program from FCM and delivered in partnership with Tree Canada is worth checking out if you are an urban recipient. So what's next? Now that the website, as I mentioned, is sort of in place as a platform to build on, our big focus moving into 2025 is to build that community out and learn from it. So here's how you can help us help you. We'd love if you would reach out if you're a 2 billion recipient or an organization that supports 2 billion projects or just interested in working with 2 billion recipients. And what we'd like to know is just about your challenges and how you think we can help. And the best way to do that is to reach out via email. We really want to have these one-to-one conversations with as many recipients as we can, because we know that from project to project and region to region, context to context, that the challenges are very different. So we'd like to get into like the nitty-gritty of what you're navigating. And I just want to clarify here, again, that we are looking to talk to mass planting, Indigenous stream, or provincial and territorial stream projects. So you can reach out via email. And then also the community that we're trying to build, we're very conscious that these aren't people who are like chronically online, that we want to be reaching the people on the ground implementing the work. So if there is an easier way for you to get in contact with us, if you would rather DM us on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on LinkedIn, that is totally fine. We'll be monitoring those inboxes and we can set up something that way. If you're out and you have an idea, you see something that makes you think of some feedback or a question you have, please just send it to us any way that's convenient for you. Also, if you subscribe to our mailing list, which you can do from every page on the website at the bottom of the page, you can always just hit reply to any of those emails. That will get you right into my inbox. So cool. So those are the one-to-one conversations that we are planning. And we think those will be incredibly helpful to our team in understanding sort of priority areas for support. But we also understand that we're not going to build a community through these closed door one-to-one conversations. So we have a number of sort of group events and formats that we hope to use to get recipients talking to each other and connecting. So, as I mentioned, the working group was meeting for an hour monthly before the holidays. The next sort of evolution of our working group meetings are going to be, again, 1 hour monthly meetings, but we want to invite all 2BT recipients to join those. And they'll very much like the working group be based on community interest. And we'll just see what that evolves into in terms of whether it involves guest speakers and case studies and training and things like that. So if you're a 2 billion recipient in the Mass Planting Indigenous or PT stream, we'll be sending out invites for you to join those meetings as well. If you don't get an invite and you're one of those people, feel free to reach out so we don't miss anybody. The next is our first in-person gathering, which we're really excited about. To our knowledge, this will be the first in-person gathering of 2BT recipients ever. So what we are going to do is the Forest Canada Conference is in February, late February in Toronto. The day before the Forest Canada Conference, we are going to use that opportunity of people already coming together to meet. So it'll be sort of an all-day meeting. It'll be very we're going to try an open format, so it won't be one-to-many presentations. It won't be like a conference style meeting. It'll be a community building meeting. So the special offer from Forest Canada is that you'll get free entrance into the social the night of the 19th, and then half off your registration for the Forest Canada conference the next day. So when you register for the RCC gathering, you'll get information on how to get that offer. So I think Amber's put the link to the chat, or link for registration in the chat just now. And I also here just want to acknowledge that we're aware that travel is a big expense, and we want to have as diverse a range of recipients able to join as possible. So if you'd like to send someone out and you'd like to discuss financial support for that, please just send me an email and we can totally connect on that. Cool. So that's event number two. I just want to clarify here. I know we're talking about common challenges, and I just want to give some insight into like, what does that mean exactly, and what have we already been hearing so far? So in our conversations with the working group and the few recipients that we have been able to connect with so far, some of the big challenges we're hearing are related to match funding, which doesn't directly apply to the Indigenous stream, but we are hearing it a lot from the other streams. So just knowing which funds are eligible for match, communicating non-carbon benefits to donors, different sort of donation cycles versus multi-year agreements with nurseries, how to sort of make those align. These are all challenges that we're hearing from multiple different types of organizations in different places. Challenges related to seed and stock, finding nurseries, timelines required by nurseries, limited availability of seed and knowledge about seed and stock in some regions. And then finally, where to plant, identifying suitable project sites, and also working with landowners and knowing like sort of the nuances between planting on private and public land. These are all challenges that we're hearing and that I want to acknowledge are not challenges that we expect the RCC to sort of solve for anyone. The idea here is that by identifying challenges that a number of people are having and bringing those groups together to talk about how those challenges are impacting them, that hopefully there's a way for us to navigate them together a little more efficiently, and hopefully like quickly, easier than we would on our own. Cool. So those are challenges that are specific to 2BT and specific to projects that we're hearing, but we're also aware that there are these like macro issues going on that affect all sort of planting organizations. So one of those is, of course, planting after wildfire. So to get ahead of this topic, our first sort of event conversation series is going to focus on just this, forest recovery strategies after wildfire. So Amber's been working really hard on getting this all set up. So the first session will be January 29th, and it'll focus on species shifts. The second session will be on the 5th, and it'll talk about high severity wildfires. And then the third will be on the 12th, and it'll be about wildfire habitat, or wildlife habitat. Wow. Planning, replanting for wildlife habitat. So all of those you're able to register for them right now. I think Amber's put the links in the chat as well. So we hope to see you there. Those are open, just to be super clear, open to anyone, open to the public. So share with whoever you think would benefit from and be interested. We want to see as many people there as possible. So those are just some of the things we have planned. So then I just want to clarify, because I know after speaking with a couple groups, this has come up. So what is the difference, or what's the interface, I guess, between the RCC and the NRCan 2BT team? So I just want to clarify that yes, the RCC is funded by the 2BT program, and we do talk regularly with the 2BT team. But the RCC team is not involved with or privy to any decision-making processes around who gets agreements or what the terms are or anything like that. So the good rule of thumb is that for anything, if you're applying for 2BT or you have an agreement, if there's anything that you want to talk about in terms of your specific agreement and the specific rules of the 2BT program, anything like that, that's when you go to NRCan. If you are looking for support in connecting with implementation partners or finding technical resources to help you plan your project or connecting with other 2BT recipients to ask a question about how they did something to be part of this community of practice, then that's when you can come to us. And also, when in doubt, reach out to either of us and we'll connect you with the other one, whoever's best suited to answer your question. But that's sort of the key difference there. And again, we do have Andrew and Jordan on the call. So if anyone has a specific question about that right now, then go ahead. That's fair game to ask. So I just want to summarize some of the takeaways here. What is the RCC? It's an implementation-focused, community-driven platform for supporting 2BT project implementation, and it is evolving based on your feedback and collaboration. So we want to hear from you. How to have your say in shaping the RCC. Again, reach out for a chat. Feel free to email me directly at hello@reforestcollective.ca. We will also be sending out the invites for those monthly meetings. Attending those meetings and participating in them was a great way for us to hear from you on a regular basis, especially about challenges that are emerging as time goes on, instead of us getting this like snapshot from a one-off one-to-one call. And then also, if you sign up for our mailing list and socials, we'll be sending updates through those as well. And then finally, just want to remind everyone about the events we mentioned. The wildfire series is going to be really interesting, and that's coming up, the first session, the end of the month. And then we'd love to see you out in Toronto at the end of February to meet you in person and start building that community and those connections in a little bit more human way than through a screen. So that brings us to the end. As Tom mentioned, we're going to be sending out this presentation and the recording after the fact. But now we have time for questions. So I'll stop sharing. Cool. And we're pretty much on time, which is awesome. So if anyone wants to unmute and ask their question verbally, that's great. But I'll give a minute in case anyone needs to work up the courage. Any hand raises?
Nothing in the chat yet, but feel free to unmute yourselves, and we're hoping for just a general casual chat now, just asking any questions anyone has.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to share about maybe a key success in the last few months with the 2 billion program, maybe project success that you're maybe want to share with the group?
I don't want to call anyone out. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names, so maybe people already knew a lot of this stuff.
I'll jump in and say something. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah. Hi, Matt. Go ahead.
Hey, everybody. My name is Matt McKernan from Integrity Reforestation. Yeah, figured I'd just take the opportunity to share that we had an announcement today that we're doing a big wildfire project in the Agoki Forest. We'll be working with Forest Canada, Tree Canada, the Arbor Day Foundation, a few corporate sponsors, and NRCan's 2 billion tree program to plant 3 million trees over the next 2 years in the Agoki Forest. So super excited about that. Also looking forward to participating in the wildfire recovery series that you guys have launched here, and think what you're doing is amazing. So happy to be a part of it.
Thanks, Matt. Oh, Sarah, you did. There you go.
Sorry, I have like 3 different ways to mute myself. That's awesome, Matt. Thank you for sharing that. And that's exactly what we're looking for, is just like openness around what's going on out there so people can make these connections sort of organically. So if anyone else has any exciting announcements or projects they want to just like make everyone aware of, that'd be awesome.
I don't have any announcement, and I'm just learning about this.
Uh-huh.
Actually, I would like to press all of the participants to ask the question, what are the biggest challenges that they experienced in the past, or in all of this program. Anybody there who did anything with on private land, I would like to know that, and any experience with urban planting programs as well. What are the major obstacles? What are the challenges that happened throughout whatever last 2 years or a year or whatever? I would like to hear from somebody.
Cool. In case we don't get anybody to say anything, would you like to put your email in the chat, and then anyone who wants to reach out directly could do that maybe? And then I know Jill, you're here, if you wanted to say anything about the FCM program in terms of urban.
Oh, sure. Here's my email, folks. Yeah.
Sure, Sarah. I mean, I'm thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to talk now or towards the end if there's other comments or questions first, and if that makes more sense.
I mean, go ahead.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be a lineup of questions.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks for facilitating, Sarah and Amber. I put my email in the chat because it was mentioned earlier. Green Municipal Fund is a program through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. We have a new initiative, relatively new, that launched this past spring called Growing Canada's Community Canopies, GCCC for short. And essentially the focus is on urban forestry, as I mentioned. And so we're also funded through the 2 billion trees. And so if as a nonprofit or through the support of a municipality, you can apply for funding either directly for tree planting, and we are also going to be launching for strategic grants. So that could be, assessing your canopy and identifying where the gaps might be in your canopy. Or for a municipality, maybe it's like a tree protection bylaw. Those are some of the examples within the strategic grants. I won't get into too much details, but just to say that it's a 50% cost share. So we will fund up to 50%. Minimum grant would be $25,000. My email's there. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Happy to talk, give you more details and talk more about it. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much, Jill. Thanks for that. I don't want to talk over anybody. Andrew, I don't know if you're I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you like to say anything about the upcoming 2ET application cycle deadline? Or maybe Jordan is there.
As always, we maintain our open applications and encourage everyone to apply. As Sarah was mentioning, they're available to assist with answering any questions that you have, but you also can still continue to go directly to program staff if you have questions. So this just opens up another avenue. If you're in any way concerned about prejudicing anything, that's entirely up to you. You have basically, this is meant to provide you that second, trusted friend, if you will, that where you can bounce ideas off. And, as Sarah alluded to or mentioned in her presentation about, matchmaking, all the other services that they plan on offering. But yes, our window closes, is it, I believe, tomorrow? Could be today. I don't follow it that closely. We've already had a number of applications and are reaching out if there are any deficiencies in people's applications so that they can quickly answer the questions so they can be properly evaluated. And then in 4 months, we have another call coming up. So important to note that scheduled calls are not impacted by any change in government. Our ability to approve projects and to negotiate agreements is, however. So if you were to submit an application and the government were to fall and we enter a writ period, that we would carry on doing standard government business, and that would include receiving applications. The caveat is that if there was a change in government, or if the government had a change in direction post-election, that it could be that they decide to change the parameters of the program that may not align with your project, or you may have to adjust your application. So just to be aware that that is out there. I don't believe the program has made a decision about holding on evaluating anything. That's sort of out there. We have to wait and see if there is an election called or what before the program makes a bunch of decisions. There's a lot of what if scenarios. Some people thought we'd be in a writ period right now. So we will deal with what comes. But for now, if you have a project, please continue to work either directly with 2BT staff or with Sarah and her team, so that you can get the strongest proposal and do the good work that everyone who's a current recipient is doing for Canada's forests. Thanks, Sarah.
Osho, on your question earlier, I think Jess had a comment about it, about private land.
Yeah, and I don't know if Peter will add to it, but there was a question around like what are some of the challenges that folks are facing with one example is reaching private landowners. So I was just going to comment that, we put a lot of investment into finding private landowners to plant with and to nurture them along in the relationship. And so that kind of access to land and access to projects is always one that we've had for the past 20 years. And so I thought I would just share that. And I'm not sure if Peter was going to add to that.
Well, yeah, I was going to say we have a good system in Ontario that maybe, I think one of the things is if we can replicate that across Canada, it would be good for the program for everybody, including the feds and the provinces and everybody else. And I think that's what your goal is, and that's great. No, my question actually is back to the fire thing. And I heard that going on up in Agoki, which is, by the way, my backyard. I have a camp and a family camp up there for the past 100 years, just about. So this year will be the 100th year. Actually, we've been up there. So, and I do have some experience with fire. I worked in fire and forestry for 35 years. So, and still in forestry for another 15 or 20, as you all know, some of you know. Fire. I didn't wonder, do we have criteria and like surveys and things that go ahead before we go about planting fires? I have some real good experience with fires, and fires take a few years sometimes to regenerate naturally. I think if you get in there right afterwards, one of my major experiences was when I went up to Red Lake in the 70s. I walked through some burn areas and I found all these little rows of spruce trees that were about 2 feet high in these 15-foot high, 25,000 stems per acre jack pine. And I went back to the office to see what happened there. And somebody said, oh, well, it looked really bad. So we went in and planted a whole bunch of trees. And then, of course, nature came in, which takes sometimes 2 or 3 years to germinate their seeds. And of course, they took off and there was no sign of any plantations, but nature did its job. I just wonder how much of that assessment is done before we commit to planting areas, because as I stated, if there is a seed source, and no matter how severe the burn, it only takes one seed from the thousands or millions that are on that forest to germinate or to generate a tree. And sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years. It doesn't necessarily happen in the first year after a fire. So again, just a question. We talk about a lot about planting wildfires, but nature normally does that for us. So I just wondered how much assessment is done beforehand to determine that, yes, in fact, it does need our help.
Thanks for bringing that up, Peter. So that's part of the wildfire session that's coming up on January 29th is the first session for the wildfire series. So we put in the chat here like a little couple lines ahead to register for that series. That's exactly what we'll get into in terms of that topic. There are different approaches to use to plan out whether or not to restore after fire, and it's definitely a complex decision-making process that we'll get into.
Oh yeah, because I remember we were the first to bring in cedars in brachy cedars from and actually develop the seeding system in northwestern Ontario. And a lot of even our senior technicians 2 or 3 years after say, oh, look, see, nothing's happening here. But in year 4, all of a sudden the weather cooperated and everything, and all of a sudden that seed took off. And again, you got your seedling at a low cost, which by seeding versus by planting. So again, just caution that we should have some way to evaluate whether or not the natural systems are going to take care of that site versus us going in, after, oh, I've burnt really bad, we got to go in and plant it, but that's not necessarily the case.
I think one of the things, Peter, at least in the West, in the fire, what we're noticing was, and especially in a certain area, was forest killed with a mountain pine beetle or other insect, and then fire came through.
Yeah.
But we are finding out that the intensity of the mountain pine beetle fire is like almost sometimes 4 times higher. It's behaved literally like a prairie fire of the heat intensity that is actually destroy the topsoil. Most of the forest fire don't touch pretty much topsoil, generally speaking. And I know I followed very close situation in Montana and Oregon and California. We have a situation that usually after the forest fire, natural regeneration is occurred, generally speaking, depending on many factors. But what they're finding out that now prairie grass is coming back after the forest fire. Which is we're noticing in several areas, even I know in the private land, what used to be forest, very healthy forest, we're noticing that natural regeneration doesn't coming back. And don't forget also the years of drought following the forest fire. It's crucial.
There are definitely opportunities. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, not saying it's not good on all sites, and you do have certain circumstances that make it more, as you say, less desirable, I guess, for regeneration. So I agree, but I'm just saying we should have an assessment program in place to make sure that we're, not throwing money away.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. And I to give you an example, I was doing the consulting work for the insurance company here in Alberta and doing the assessment of after the fire, what we had in 2023. And that's one of my questions and discussion with insurance business is if this forest is going to come back.
Yeah.
And how we're going to do it. And I find out very few research studies that has done of the assessment prior the tree planting, that proper assessment of the site that is burned prior the tree planting.
Right.
And I 100% agree with you that proper.
There's another example I have in my mind is, again, a 61 burn that was, again, 25,000 stems per acre or hectare of jack pine. And again, very few cones because it's young. It was only 13-year-old stand. But the fire, severe fire went through, burned it to a crisp. You'd think, oh, nothing came back. I went back afterwards. It came back like a perfectly managed forest. There was, again, almost like 6x6 spacing and whatever, even though, the fire was intense and everything, there still was enough seed there that you did get at least a tree or so every, cubic or every square meter. So.
To your question, just to sort of move us along to the other stuff, is that with any application, we want to hear the why between what it is you're proposing and what it's based on. So if you're saying I'm going to replant forest fires, great. Just tell us why we have to support a planting project versus nature, and then justify and speak to the bona fides. So with all applications, you've got to have a sound reason for doing what it is you're doing. And it has to align with what an RPF would say, yes, do that, as opposed to, hey, let's get some federal money and do some tree planting.
Yeah.
It's got to have a good reason. Anyway, so back over to you, Sarah and Amber.
Ron, I'm just wondering, you're off mute. Did you have something to say?
Yeah. I was kind of waiting to talk about something, but just quickly on this topic, there obviously are a lot of factors. One of my colleagues, Brant, is going to be speaking in the seminar on wildfire restoration. But one of the key components that sticks out in this particular example, Peter, is just the species as well. Yeah. So we do quite a bit of wildfire work ourselves, but we target white spruce stands because white spruce doesn't come back after a fire the same way that jack pine or black spruce would.
Right.
So obviously there's a lot of factors and it needs to be all taken into consideration. What I was going to say is I got to be part of the hub and the development of the RCC, and it was great. We had a lot of conversations like this where we asked our questions and we shared our knowledge and spoke about our different challenges, and that was kind of what Sarah and Amber put together to help to develop this program, which is great. And then the last thing I was going to say is, because we also like to talk about our projects, we have a project that we've been doing with a First Nations group, where the first year we planted cuttings from as much as possible from the area, and in the second year we are going to be planting seedlings and cuttings that are all from the area, and we're getting the locals, the actual the local band to collect the seedlings or to collect the seed and the cuttings and stuff. And I'm going to be going and doing the training with them next week. And so I think of that as a big win of this program, and so there's a lot of different opportunities. So it's not just about the planting of the trees, it's the community engagement, the reconciliation, the learning, and the learning going both ways as well. What we find is that seed collection is actually a traditional practice for them, and they have a lot to teach us in that respect as well. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Thanks for that, Ron. That's super interesting. Yeah, so that's the perfect example of something, if another group hears what you guys are doing at Shakti and want to connect and understand how they could maybe try to do something similar, then that would be amazing. I just want to say, Peter and Tosho, your conversation was great. And that's exactly the type of conversation we're looking to sort of foster at the wildfire series. So just want to say that as much as we're looking to bring the science, there will be a lot of NRCan researchers actually speaking at the wildfire series. I think bringing these experiences and practical knowledge to the conversation is super, super valuable. So thank you for that. I want to say I got a direct message question. I'm gonna maybe neutralize all the details in case there's a reason why they direct messaged it. But I got a message from someone saying that they are the program delivery agent for a 2BT recipient. So they're not the actual recipient, but they're helping implement the project, and whether they are invited to join the open monthly meetings. And that's a great question. Absolutely. No problem with that. So if that is you, if you fall into that sort of category, send me an email and I can also add you into those meetings. Cool. Awesome. If there's no other questions, no one else who wants to just poke their head out and say hello, thank you again for everyone for joining. We'll send out
Sarah, before you go, I'm not sure how much. Oh, you have a minute. Forget it.
Oh yeah, no, one more minute. If you want to connect directly, Tosho, that's absolutely
that's
fine.
No, that's fine. One of the things I would probably kind of feedback on the program, as I promote crazily this program, I in some ways, at least in Alberta, I cannot speak for the rest of the province, but at least in Alberta, I know my friend Gerard is doing lots of good work here in Alberta. What I find out is vast majority is not about those are good success tree planting. We haven't heard about them in the media and social media is one of the things, and one of the things maybe again either you, Gerard, or all of you might really a little bit more target a more bigger media into the success of the program in the West, because there is at least in Alberta there is a lots of skepticism, they don't trust anything coming from the feds, to be honest. So that's one
That
of
is-
the things that I would love to hear more organized. And I know that, again, my friend Gerard is here, and he try, you know, but because I to personal connection, but I don't see it. I don't see it in the media. I don't see the certain people targeting into that, and
Yeah.
maybe that's you as organization might look more strategically on that, or and talk about more on success of the program actually.
Yeah,
Not
that's
what
a
is the
great
program
point.
about.
Yeah, I know we have some people from the 2VT comms team, and that is also something that came up in the working group, like this like opportunity, I guess, to showcase like the good work that's being done a little bit more. So that's absolutely something that is on our radar and that we'll keep talking about. Awesome. Okay, so we'll send out the presentation, and thank you all for joining. Again, hope to see you at our next event, which will be the very first wildfire series session. Thanks again, and we'll see you all soon. Bye bye. Thanks so much.